is about how you scale these DPGs into ecosystems, how you actually do DPGs right. So let's start with a keynote. So what are DPGs supposed to solve in terms of problem? This picture here is a real one. It shows the actual divide taken at night from space, the actual divide between countries with infrastructures and countries with lower infrastructure. That infrastructure in terms of flights reflects not just investments in power plants, obviously, it does reflect the whole ecosystem capability in terms of human resources, in terms of internet, and everything that revolves around the availability of this type of infrastructure. And going from physical infrastructure to digital infrastructure, we would most probably see the same gap. So that's the problem that DPGs are supposed to solve. We're supposed to solve that gap, here. We're supposed to solve that gap where hopefully through digital public goods, we are getting bricks that will form our infrastructure, bricks that are open, that countries control, that are scalable, that we can use to build entire infrastructures, that are economically efficient, because you don't have license fees, because they're reusable, where countries are sovereign, because you fully control what these bricks do. So this is what governments believe. They're hoping through DPGs, more specifically, to create savings, economies of scale. The fact that you're using an open source brick means that you're not going to pay upfront licenses. You may not pay recurrent licenses, or so we think. The fact that you're not dealing with a black box, a proprietary system where you have no access to the source code, also means that you can do pretty much what you want with it. You know exactly what you have inside, and you can customize it to your own processes without any constraint. This is what governments believe. This is what we hope to get from DPGs. Why donors also believe in it is because the promise of DPGs is that we can reuse these systems across countries, across governments, across institutions, which means a better return on investment from the donor side. Every dollar, every euro invested would have more impact, hopefully. Because you're using something that's already proven, we hope that we can accelerate the cycle of development. So you take this DPG, you set it up, and you're ready, good to go. So quicker impact. And then there's this shared moral frame which we adhere to, which is that we hope that DPGs are here in opposition to vendors who may have extractive models and create a better world, if we put it a little bit candidly in that sense. Many of these DPGs have a few deployment instances. They're backed by governments. We know some of them. But is this the whole story? Is this promise really what we hear in every conversation about DPGs? So I'd like to talk about Ariane 5. Ariane 5, 1996. The Ariane 5 was a jewel of French technology. $370 million in research back in the time, back in 1996. An evolution, a major evolution from the Ariane 4 program. We basically reused the software as is, took it from REN4, plugged it into REN5. What could be wrong? The software was battle tested, it was mature, we knew it worked. Well, guess what? 30 seconds into the flight, the rocket completely disintegrated. Why? Because 2 bytes. One of the variables in the software could not overflow in the REN4 hardware, but when it was placed in the REN5 hardware, it did overflow. We had a bug, and the rocket disintegrated. This is not the worst disaster that happened for this kind of candid approach. Some actually resulted in loss of human life, but out of respect for the victims, that's not the example I've chosen. I've just taken this one because for those who were around in 1996, I'm old, I was around, it was memorable. This failure was memorable. So let me dispel a few myths about DPGs. So one of the myths that we hear very often in conversations about DPGs is that they're free. Free as in lunch, meaning you don't pay anything for it. So I'll give you a little clue about this. If your time is free, then DPGs are free. If not, then obviously they cost a lot of money. For a government infrastructure, would you go to a pop and mom store who would run your entire infrastructure, highways, government buildings, everything, your whole health system? Unlikely. The infrastructure needs to run your digital infrastructure for a government are much bigger than that. You would need entire units, more likely to be entire plants, manufacturers for the physical goods, which is, and few governments here probably know about these IT centralized units that run government infrastructure and the challenges in establishing this. I'll come back to the details. One of the reasons why we believe it's that simple is because we were conditioned to download software on our mobile phones. We tend to think of information system as software as just the same from that little mobile game that you download on your phone to be the same as your government information system. It's a lot more complicated than that, actually. Running the system is a whole operation. It's not like you can just set it up and forget it and it'll just run forever. You have to run the infrastructure behind the plant, ensure you have connectivity, ensure you have people who patch it on a regular basis for security and so on. It's a whole operation. Running a government information system is a complex operation. The cost, actually, still about this myth about DPGs and DPIs being free, is here. We'll get into more detail. I'll plug in a shameless teaser here for the Friday workshop in procurement. But the cost of running an infrastructure would probably be more along the $20–40 million tag over 5 years, total cost of ownership, for a small to mid-sized country. This is the cost that it would take to have government tier data centers, to have the teams that can ensure your continuous security, to have to train the people to use this infrastructure, and this is really summary. I mean, the cost can go much higher for the bigger countries, of course. So let's go to the second myth that I would like to dispel. And the second myth is that open source is free, DPGs are free, but in the sense of this time speech, free as in legally free, they're not. Many people do not exactly understand the distinction between intellectual property, licenses, and there are quite a few nuances about this. So intellectual property is you own the rights to the software. You're the author of the software, you own it, and when you license it, You give the right to other people to use the software. DPG in the sense is no different from proprietary software. The authors, those who wrote the software, own it. And they can give you the right to use this software under any license they wish. There are obviously the proprietary licenses where you don't have the right to reverse engineer, look at the source code and so on, but you have, even in the open source world, you have a wide variety of licenses. And it goes from the more permissive licenses where basically the license tells you, I'm the owner, but you can do whatever you want with the software, including rename it, rebrand it, and resell it. And you have other licenses, which we call copyleft, and again, we'll get into more details on Friday on this. But the idea is, if you're going to use a copyleft, and I'm simplifying, we'll get into more details in the panels on this. If you're using a copyleft licensed software, then you have the obligation to republish the changes that you make to the software. And again, there are nuances, we'll get there. Point is, you have to respect the licenses of the software that you use. There are a few cases in courts. Don't think that because it's open source, that because its authors have open sourced it, that you can do whatever you want with it. There are a few courts and cases that ended with substantial settlements around the misuse of open source software and the lack of respect of their licenses. So when you select a DPG, be careful about the licenses that they are under. Ensure that they are compatible with your intended use. And again, we'll discuss this during the panels. Another myth about DPGs is that they're inherently more secure than proprietary software. And we'll discuss this issue of security too. The saying goes, and I was already part of this back in the 90s, when we all believed that just by open sourcing the software, it would suddenly magically make it secure, because developers would magically pop up and fix any vulnerability that would be discovered in the software. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. 99%, and I'll come back to this, of GitHub projects are simply not maintained. They're published and not maintained. There's something that we call 0-day in software security. For those, obviously, those in cybersecurity know what a 0-day is, but to put it simply, 0-day is when a vulnerability is discovered, and it's the authors of the software don't know about it, which means that between the time that that vulnerability is discovered and the time a fix is brought, or even brought to the awareness of the authors of the software, there's this window where your software is absolutely vulnerable. And yes, sometimes obfuscation, and this, I know this is very controversial and provocative, and I don't fully believe in what I'm going to say, but I'd rather say it because it is a topic of discussion. But it is, obfuscation can be part of security. Sometimes you don't want people to see your source code simply because you don't want to give the possibility of to sophisticated hostile actors to see your potential vulnerabilities. As I said, I don't believe in that, but I'm just giving you food for thought here. So let me just give you a few projects and the traction they get in terms of development. As we said, fixing your bugs, your vulnerabilities quickly means that you have developer traction, means that your open source system, your DPG, has developer traction, meaning that enough people around are contributing code to that system. Well, if you look at the top ones, they're engineering platforms. They all have, so the top one has 21,000 contributors. Microsoft VS Code, a developer environment, has about 20,000 contributors. If you look at the nature of these, they're all engineering projects. Why? Because engineers do what they know. They code engineering processes. Getting traction into health-related system, into government-related system, is a lot more complicated. Actually, you would, as I mentioned earlier, 99% of GitHub projects are simply stale, non-maintained. And most GovTech projects are actually struggle to go beyond a few tens of contributors for the most active ones. Another myth, I'll go quick. Another myth is about the benevolence of this. The idea is that people believe in the cause. I was quite literally told this. Believe in the cause and will suddenly start contributing to DPGs and open source software. It's not true. There are whole economics behind open source software. You need to be able to fund your open source development, and we'll talk a lot about this. You need to be able to create ecosystems of vendors around your DPGs for them to be able to survive, get contribution back, and so on. So I'll go quickly from here. How do we go beyond these myths? So beyond the myths, I'll go quick because we already start late. When the notion of ecosystems is absolutely key when you decide to adopt DPGs and work with DPGs. I mean, the point is not just whether it's the DPG or not. The point is how do you take those bricks, those pillars, build your DPI, digital public infrastructure, which is the digital pendant of your physical infrastructure. So the same way you build hospitals, highways, public buildings, you want to build your DPI so that you can run an economy around this. And the way you do it is by ensuring, whether you select a DPG or a non-DPG system, you need to ensure a certain set of conditions around that to create an ecosystem. So hopefully the slide is back. There you go. An ecosystem of actors around it, and you need to work on all these together. Part of the ecosystems is academia. We'll mention this. Collaborations with academia, with my great colleagues who are going to be on the panels. You need an ecosystem of startups and vendors who are going to work on this. We'll also mention this during their discussions. Big companies are necessary. They fund both DPGs actually and proprietary affiliates. You need all sorts of different actors. You need, we mentioned finance and academia, and of course support of the government. We'll go into the panels. We'll discuss the governance. It's a key issue. It's seen as a policy, theoretical, abstract issue. We'll try to make it more tangible, because when you're going to implement your DPGs and try to scale them into DPIs, your governance, the way you establish your governance is absolutely key. So we'll discuss that. We'll try to make it as tangible as possible. But the idea is, sorry, there you go. The idea is you want to move to the top, that's right corner, where you have institutional sovereignty, where basically you've got the local pool of skilled people who can maintain your DPGs, DPIs, because obviously someone has to operate, as I mentioned earlier, your DPGs and DPIs, and where the decisions are made by the government for the benefit of its country. And then we still in this discussion about governance and interoperability and standards and interoperability, again, which is going to be one of the topics of the two panels. We'll go how we turn these DPGs into infrastructure. Again, far from the different candid conversations about just download your DPG from GitHub and everything will be fine. How you actually structure this, how you create interoperability even around between DPGs and non-DPGs, how you actually make these talk to each other, how you can scale this up into an entire infrastructure. So I won't take much more time. We'll move to the panels. First one is about interoperability. I'm going to call my fantastic panelists, sorry. First one, Chris Tullis from the World Bank. We don't need to introduce the World Bank. Anita Mittal from DCI and GIZ. Anita will take time to introduce the DCI. Stéphanie de la Briole. I think for many of you, I don't even need to introduce her. From the Secure Industry Alliance. And last but not least, Gail Hodge from the Open ID Foundation. What interoperability means, what standards mean, what governance around these DPGs mean, and how they and why they matter actually when you start implementing your infrastructure projects. Anita, I'll start with you. Can you, of course, introduce DCI, explain what DCI does, and then define what a standard is?
Thanks, Shane. So, DCI is Digital Convergence Initiative. It is a working group under Universal Social Protection 2030. Universal Social Protection, USP 2030, is a world alliance where people have for the first time come together as members from the governments, international organizations, regional organizations, civil society, and social partners to provide for social protection for all. DCI, as an initiative under this organization, has taken on the mandate of promoting digital transformation in social protection sector. It is funded by European Union as well as German government and implemented by GIZ, World Bank, ILO, Expertise France, and FIAP. It aims to share knowledge on how to effectively implement social protection systems, develop consensus-based standards for interoperability of systems along the social protection delivery chain, and also support countries in digital transformation of their social protection systems as well as capacity building. So in the context of this panel, one of the key objectives of DCI is consensus-based standards. So how do we define a standard? I think we all understand standard as a general term, but ISO, if it defines, it says it's a, think of it as a recipe of, or a formula for defining how to do best anything. So if it's a security standard, how do you best ensure security? What is the formula for it? So under DCI, we are defining technical standards following the European Union interoperability framework, where we define organizational standards, which are process, data standards, and APIs. And these we are defining at different interface levels, and one of them will be ID2, ID talking to SP systems.
When you start a project, how do you actually select standards? And what happens if you don't have standards? What do you do?
Yes, so under the DCI, there was a study conducted by the Social Protection Interagency Board, which found that the social protection sector does not have interoperability standards. So based on this study, this whole initiative was set up. that we need standards for interoperability of SP systems. And that's why we constituted it under USP 2030, so that it gets a mandate from this Universal Social Protection Organization for defining the standard and facilitate its adoption.
When you defined the standards, how did you proceed? Did you agree with the government, for example? Did you decide to impose it on the different players? How did you actually, what made you think that that standard was the right direction? Let's make it, for example, let's go through the process. How did you actually make it happen?
That's a great question. So when we started this initiative, we said, this is not the first time we are implementing integrated and interoperable social protection systems. There are countries who have done it really well. So we went with a series of webinars called Talking Interoperability, wherein we brought countries like Turkey, Chile, which have got highly mature integrated and interoperable systems, to find out how they did it. Then we also brought countries who are struggling with it. So learning from these countries, we again had a set of workshops called Interoperability in Action, where we brought practitioners from the respective fields. So like when we had standards for how a civil registration system talks to a social protection system, we brought stakeholders from UNICEF, we brought international organizations, World Bank, then we brought solution providers, OpenCRVS, HERA from the private sector. We also brought country representatives, geographically dispersed, to represent their voice in terms of what standards mean to them, and as well as independent experts who helped us define what this standard should look like. Then we drafted this as a working group. Then we constituted a standards committee, where we again had stakeholders from multiple sectors, like government, international organization, private sector, solution providers. As part of the committee, went through it, reviewed it, refined it, put it for public review, and that it put it for endorsement by USP 2030. We also implemented some of this as proof of concept with a couple of DPGs to show that they really work.
Thanks, Anita. So we can see that you had a consensus-based way of building this standard. It wasn't something that was mandated. It was something where you basically built a community around that standard to bring it on. I'll go to Stéphanie. Stéphanie, could you introduce the Secure Industry Alliance? I have a bit of a provocative question for you. Standards could be sometimes a way to protect incumbents if they're shaped in a way that they would be there to protect existing players. Can you introduce the Secure Industry Alliance and tell us more about this?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Stéphanie de Labriole, representing the Secure Identity Alliance, which is a federation of technology public and private players active in the world, having worked with governments everywhere in the world. So no, I would say standards are not there to lock existing position. And I think we should go back to some definition. And Secure Identity Alliance as an organization, in 2018, we were at ID for Africa, and one of the biggest message from the governments in Africa was enough of vendor lock-in. So we thought about it, saying, look, how are we going to do that? So I think the market, the identity market at this stage, which was a bit of a probably confidential market, with all our actors very much involved with governments, helping them implement their systems, providing all the the documents and credentials. So we actually decided to create a community as well, and called upon governments to join us. And we were joined by 20 countries. And there we started working on what we needed to do. And before I go into what we did, I think it's important when we talk about standards, okay, it's good to talk about it in general, but here we are in an identity event. So I think we need to make the difference as well. You know, there's the creation of your identity, and then there's the use of your identity. And sometimes I feel we don't know what we're talking about. So at the time here, we were talking about what was happening at the creation of, you know, for the creation of identity. Within most of the time, you know, the government walls, governments have many databases. Some of them were locked, it's true, not interoperable with others. It was very difficult for government to change suppliers. So we decided together, let's work on a standard. And so the community was there, you know, there was a lot of exchanges, workshop, you know, we looked at the use cases, and we came out with the standards that most of you, I think, have heard of. I'm always showing it, you know, OSIA, that everybody talks about. This was so developed in 3 years. We actually looked at what had been done in other markets like telecoms, banking, you know, with open banking, and we thought the approach is good. Building blocks like DPI, same approach, you know. You just build, you just break into different building blocks, create APIs. So it's like, you know, modules, and you connect the different modules, which mean if you want to change a supplier for, sorry, in 2019, 20, ask even more. They said, yeah, but you say you're OSIA compliant, but how can I be sure about that? You know, and I want to make sure as well, they wanted OSIA to become an international standard. So the first thing we did, we set up a qualification program, but we did it in a way where, you know, we develop the standards with governments, but we make sure we are not the one checking that the standard is properly implemented. So we developed a test plan, and another organization, Global Platform, is actually qualifying the vendors, and they are the ones who are actually verifying that the supplier is, you know, that the standard has been implemented properly. And then we started as well with the ITU. So we contacted the ITU. We actually evolved also the SIA governance, you know, change a few things. So everything was vetted legally from a legal standpoint, you know, by the ITU. And we became what they call an A5 organization. That means ITU can refer to what SIA is saying. You know, we are a respectable organization, exactly like our colleagues from the OpenID Foundation. And then we started with the qualification of OSIA. So OSIA last spring became X1281. So it was approved by 193 countries as a standard to interconnect building block, you know, at the creation of identity stage. You need to know as well that the community is still very much alive. We are evolving, and we are actually moving into the, you know, the border system of governments, because, and this is global. Governments have a lot of databases, you know, in their walls, and they don't talk to one another. And 80% of what we did for civil ID can be used for, you know, border ID. So that's a big development at the moment.
Thank you, Stephanie. Chris, so we heard both Anita and Stephanie talk about the way they built these standards, but it still may sound a little bit abstract. What is this about?
No, thanks a lot. I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Chris Tullis, and I'm with the ID for D initiative at the World Bank, Identification for Development. We've been coming to ID for Africa for many years. It's really great to see this movement, you know, growing. And recently, the ID for D initiative is grown, and so we no longer look exclusively at ID. Now we've become part of an umbrella program on digital public infrastructure. And where we also look at electronic signatures, public key infrastructure, data sharing payments. And you know, why expand the scope? It's because the global dialogue is expanding, but even just for us within the World Bank, what we've learned is that identity is a key enabler, but it's not enough. No one ever has woke up in the morning, man, I really wish I had a digital identity. That would be so cool. I could have this app, and then there'd be screens, and it would be a really great user interface. You don't want a digital identity. You want to do something. Your mother's sick at home in the village, and you want to send her money. You need to make a payment. Yeah, you need digital ID for that. But you want to travel, and you need to cross a border. Those are the things we want to enable all of our client countries to do. So we're expanding our scope beyond just identity narrowly. And so this interoperability discussion really fits into that, because once you try to fit identity into a broader ecosystem and go beyond just giving people cards, giving people apps, but allowing themselves to do things, pretty soon you're going to have to share some data, either from the digital ID to another system. You're going to have to verify that digital ID in another sector or in another country. And you have all sorts of problems that if you don't have this interoperability, you're not going to be able to do. And so to be able to really empower the economy and let people access all these services, we need to think about interoperability. So the problems, the way I think of interoperability in terms of problem set is at three sort of levels. One is at a systems level, one is at a national level, and then another one is at an international cross-border level. So let me explain what I mean. So at a systems level, you've already seen interoperability problems. Software engineers, software developers are really clever people. They're problem solvers. If you give them a problem, they'll solve it very quickly. They'll start building an app. They'll say, okay, I need an identifier, no problem. I'll generate one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I need a date. What date format? No problem. Month, date, year. And they will go. They will make a piece of software that works. And then someone else is making another fantastic piece of software that works. But because they've all been solving their own problems and they haven't been talking to each other and they haven't been thinking about talking to each other tomorrow, they've solved these problems in ways that don't scale very well. And then it turns out when you try to share data between these systems or orchestrate a service that requires multiple databases to talk, then you have all sorts of problems because they're not interoperable. You also have to integrate with legacy environments. Very few countries, if you're building a digital ID, probably you already have a civil registry. Probably you already have a national ID system. Probably that's already digitalized. Probably you've already got some biometric data. But if you can't access that data, if it's not in a standard format, you're going to have a really hard time leveraging it for your digital ID, and you're going to end up creating something new. So just already getting your solution off the ground, already you have 17 interoperability problems. Then, once we've created our system, now we want to use it for something, because it's not just about making IDs, it's about empowering people and delivering services. So for that, I'm going to have to share some data with another service provider. I'm going to have to share data across government. For example, if I want to do a social protection program like Anita has been working on, I might need to check the eligibility of someone. I need to make sure they're actually poor. So now I want to look at their tax record. If it turns out that they own 4 Mercedes G-Wagons, maybe they are not poor. So for that, I need to see a vehicle registration database. So for that, I need to share this data. Now, you also have a cross-border problem. So not all services are delivered cross borders, but there's a tremendous amount of really interesting things you can do when you can trust something from another country. It enables trade, it enables travel, it enables all sorts of things around migration, whether it's giving services to migrants and refugees or anything of that sort. And you're not leveraging all the benefits of trade and single markets if you're not able to trust data that crosses borders. If you have an entrepreneur in a small country in Africa, they could be selling services to another country, and that whole market, you could build that ecosystem, but only if you have this trust and this interoperability. So those are kind of the 3 levels that I think of the problem being at.
Thanks, Chris. I was thinking of maybe putting some lessons learned from other experience in setting standards, but for the sake of time, because we're already a little bit short, I'll skip that one. I mean, this is a discussion that could last hours. So we're trying to give really target nuggets here. Chris, I'm going to stay with you for now, because we're still at the inception of project, and when you select, therefore, when you're going to start a project that will be a building block to your digital public infrastructure, how do you go and translate that into technical requirements? What is the process? I would like, ideally, the public here to picture it out in a very tangible way, how they go and issue procurement or start a project that would be compliant with certain standards. You were mentioning the importance of these standards, so how do you actually do it?
Okay, so first of all, I'll say something that I say a lot, which is the World Bank does not implement projects. We provide financing to our clients, which are governments in Africa and other regions, and they implement projects, and we provide financing and sometimes technical support. So the World Bank does not procure solutions, but we do work with our partner governments to help them procure different systems in a way that meets their needs. So, and I say that because it's not my job to decide how we're going to procure something. I review a request for proposals or terms of reference, and we'll work together with our clients to improve them. And if there's some issue with, you know, okay, maybe you didn't put this standard in here, but it'd be really good because that would help you, or maybe you should think about architecting this in a different way because that would prevent some vendor lock-in. Then we have that dialogue. But the country governments we support all have their own views on the systems they want to implement. They all have legacy environments that they're trying to integrate to. And at the end of the day, it's their system and they're making their own decisions as sovereign entities. So I just want to be very clear about our role in that process, which is very much an accompanying role and an advisory role. So now, in terms of you know, crafting an RFP, that's you know, there's a lot to be said about that. But I would say that there's a few headline principles that we I think probably apply in most situations. One is at the architecture level. Okay, so first of all, you don't want to get technology specific in your RFP. You don't want to say, I want 9 MacBook Pros and 3 A100 GPU chips and whatever. You want to be outcome oriented because that lets the market propose the best solution, the most innovative solution.
Let me be provocative there. Can you put a DPG into your RFP?
Sure. So you can put if things that are you can procure a systems integrator to help you accompany you in the process of adapting an open source code library that you wish to adapt for your country system. That's fine. There's no problem with that from a procurement perspective. But not every country wants to do that. Other countries want to, they have a local software developer that they, or a software development ecosystem that they want to go to and build. Others have, you know, they want to benefit from a certain type of international, you know, expertise. So we don't sit around saying that you have to procure DPGs. We try to have a dialogue about there are these resources that are called DPGs, and it's a library of code and documentation and good practice that's growing every day. And if that's something you'd like to use, we encourage you to use that, and we can talk about how to maximize the benefits and minimize the downsides. As you pointed out, there are both. And if that's not attractive for whatever reason, it could be preference or it could be legacy constraints or any other thing, then we can write a different type of RFP. You know, so but we do encourage at the architecture level to do something called a component-based architecture. I think it's very specified based on an open standard, and those APIs are governed. Can you not hear me? I'm seeing in the back again. Sorry. And then you'll have an even bigger community of vendors that you can go to change component by component, which can give you a lot of flexibility. And then when there are standards that are accepted standards, then yeah, of course, you know, they should be used. Some standards are just, you would never implement an ID system without them. OpenID Connect, Gales on the panel, OAuth 2. You know, everyone who's checked their smartphone today has used those standards 6 times. So some standards are just, it's very obvious that you're going to do them. ISO 27001, if anyone who has a data center has implemented that standard. So we do write those in the RFPs, and we encourage that.
Okay, so what I hear is procurement is a complex process, and you have to ensure from the beginning that whatever you adopt in terms of standard, or whether it's product-led, de facto standard, or body-led, you need to select that to make sure that the economics of switching vendors afterwards becomes easy. I'm going to switch. phases of the project.
Yeah, so if there is a standard which is applicable in that domain, then I would definitely go for a product which is standards compliant, because I want to not have any vendor lock-in and have competition. If you remember yesterday, Pramod wrote in bold, standards are indispensable for interoperability, and interoperability promotes competition. So I do want to get competitive price for my product.
So never deviate from standards when you go with procurement. Gail, Chris has mentioned something interesting here, and I'll go back to the different panelists about this same question, as a matter of fact. Can you tell us a little bit more about the dynamic? So first, maybe introduce OpenID, because maybe not everyone knows who OpenID is, but I would like to know more about this dynamic of standard led by bodies who create them, and product, a little bit like what Chris was hinting to.
Yeah, happy to. So Gail Hodges, I'm the executive director of the OpenID Foundation. We are a technical open standards body. That means our standards are freely available for anyone to use. Our tests are actually also open source and freely available for anyone to use. And anyone is welcome to contribute to the development of the standards at no cost at all. The goal is really to make sure that we are essentially delivering digital public goods in our daily work, and we have since 2007. I'll give a little analogy, and I'll use you all as audience for this comparison. So I'm going to pretend that this right-hand side of the audience over here has private sector-led product or products, and this side over here to my left, you all have open source-led products and services, right? At this moment, and Chris hinted at this, probably all of you are using OpenID Connect, whether you know it or not, for things like login, single sign-on, and federated platforms. So that's like, yay, we're friends of all of you, fantastic, great. Then if I were to look at all of you who happen to be wearing glasses today, you would be the ones who maybe have found your way to use the FAPI specification for open data or data sharing. As the OpenID Foundation, we work with about 12, 14 different ecosystems on open banking and open data for insurance, for health records, for different types of financial transactions, including payments. And these are large markets and developing markets alike, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Brazil, UK, Australia, the US, et cetera. So some of you have found your way to FAPI, and often they reach out to us, and sometimes the community of standards experts helps inform us when a new country is moving to open banking, open data. And then I'll give another analogy, which is that, let's say the first couple of rows, and I see Kamwal, and I'm John, and Elizabeth, and Ramesh, all front-leading thinkers, and maybe you're early adopters and gonna trial out and help develop new specifications like OpenID for verifiable presentation and OpenID for verifiable credential issuance. So you're leaning in as implementers, open source developers, private sector entities, other standards experts, helping develop and prove out the specs, prove out the tests, adopt them in countries, in private sector implementations, so that the rest of the wider community can onboard them and take advantage of them later. So our goal as the OpenID Foundation would be for everyone, public, whether it's private sector led or open source implementers, all to be deploying standards, whether they're ours or that of our peer standards bodies, so that we can achieve that end game of global interoperability at the end of the day, so all ships rise. So that's the quick summary of how I think of like product and private sector led.
Stephanie, you want to say something about it?
Sure. I just wanted, again, we need to know we need to define what we're talking about. So back to OSIA, I want to say this standard is publicly available. Of course, it is a standard. It is an international standard. It's implemented in many countries. I had to actually ask my members because, the competition is when a market has standards, then it's very good for competition. So there's quite a few countries who've implemented it. Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, Jamaica, Costa Rica, Alaska, Monaco, Gabon, Mauritius, Morocco, Chile, RDC, we did pilot, Senegal. So you can see, if you look at, and I don't know all the countries where it's been implemented, so you need to know that it is in all the systems of companies that are part of the SIA, because they've implemented it. Now official qualification is going through. 2 members are officially qualified. These are the countries who've informed me, since yesterday. It is implemented. There's probably many more. So it's important to differentiate between, OSIA needs to be used. It's really for the creation of your ID. This is really a reference. It's an international standard. And then we work, OSIA points to OpenID Connect as soon as you start using your ID and federating your ID.
Stephanie, you were mentioning in previous discussions how your standards have actually enabled local ecosystems.
Yes, thanks. With OSIA development, we had several, companies from everywhere in the world, joining us. Very small company, because it's not totally free, because we need to support the initiative. But we set up a fee for vendors, very low, so that everybody could participate. So we did have African companies participating to the development of OSIA as well. I think standard, when you have a standard, what Chris was saying very well, when things are modular, you can have like local actors who are specialized, on this part of your, of your system, and you want to replace just one module or the others. A standard allows you to have a thriving ecosystem.
So we've been talking now about the importance of fusion standards and the different ways of approaching standards and understanding standards at the design and selection stage for launching the procurement of a DPI-related project. Before we move into the operations, I think this is an important section of these DPIs and how standard interoperability and so on apply. I'm going to take a question that appeared in the audience, and I like this one because Chris, it's got to put you a little bit on the spotlight. So the World Bank apparently is seen to promote MOSIP. How do you respond to that?
Okay. So no, it's a great question, and there's sometimes a difference between perception and reality. So this is, I want to take the opportunity to explain how we see the MOSIP, OSIA, and then any other assets that are out there on the market and in the DPG. It's on, it's just very quiet. Okay, so I'll eat it a bit. So we are not interested in seeing any particular solution adopted, right? I don't own stock in any of these companies, and if I did, I would get fired. So what we want to see is outcomes oriented. In the same way that I said with RFP, don't say I want this particular technology, say what outcomes you want. So we want to see countries have ID systems that are inclusive, that are secure, that are cost efficient, that are financially sustainable, and that are interoperable, okay? Now, when there's a digital public good that allows you to build on a code base that's maintained actively and that implements, some standardized components, that can be a key ingredient to that, right? That can be something that helps you achieve interoperability or cost efficiency or any of those outcomes. But it's not a magic bullet, and we don't think it is, and we're certainly not promoting any specific solution or any specific open source code project as a magic bullet. We think that we're very much for the digital public goods agenda. We want to see these vibrant ecosystems of code bases that are being maintained, that are being piloted in countries. There's a number of World Bank projects that are implementing a MOSIP-based ID system, or an ID system that integrates some components of the MOSIP architecture. But we have plenty of others that have procured, local solutions or international proprietary solutions. And what's, by the way, much more common is a hybrid. A great example, and Stephanie's on stage, is the biometric deduplication component called an ABIS. So there's not really today a credible open source version of an ABIS that can do population scale deduplication. There are open source biometric matchers for like 1-1 use cases, but if you've got 100 million people and you need to do what's called a 1N deduplication, there's not an open source project that's going to do that. There's a tremendous amount of research and development that goes into it. The algorithms are proprietary. So there are companies that are invested in that. I have never seen a MOSIP project that doesn't integrate to a proprietary ABIS. So the answer is almost never this or that. The answer is usually, let's look at the assets that are out there on the market, local market, global market. And in these vibrant open source communities, let's incentivize their development, but let's think about what the best strategy is for procurement for our given situation. And we have that conversation on a country by country basis in every country we work in.
Thanks, Chris. I love this point about hybrid approaches because it's not DPG versus vendors. Stephanie, you wanted to add something to this?
I just want to comment. Thank you, Chris, for recognizing the government for so many years, so you don't replace an industry in 5 minutes. And I do agree with you, it has to be a mixed-match approach. And I would love for MOSIP to implement OSIA. I mean, Ramesh is there, he's looking at me and he knows it, because I think we are, it's a bit silly to have to develop APIs of API for an integrator. APIs are there to save time, to go fast. So I think it's time, things become interoperable. And 193 countries have actually chosen OSIA for interoperability of foundational identity system, I would say.
So thanks, Stephanie. So for the sake of time, again, I mean, we could elaborate for hours on all this. How do you ensure compliance? I mean, compliance is seen with these standards is often seen as a check in a few boxes at delivery time. How do you go and actually implement that?
So for us, it's one very simple word, it's test, right? Testing some more, keep testing, particularly in the domain space of real-time interoperable networks. You have to test all points in that ecosystem. If it's an issuer of credentials in the new space where there's wallets as well, or there's verifying parties, there could be banks connected, health systems connected, like all of those different participants in the ecosystem have to be tested to make sure that they're interoperating effectively with each other. And if you're in an ecosystem where you have adopted standards, then you have the ability to ideally use things like open source tests to make sure you're all using the same test base to then confirm the interoperability. And ideally, you're also affirming that with some form of certification and compliance, which is made publicly available and transparent for everybody in the community to know. To take that a step further, the very best practices amongst, whether it's digital platforms, cloud service providers, is that you're also going to check in real time if there's anything that breaks. Right? So you have the ability with your admin systems to have visibility, oh, this particular part of this ecosystem, this bank, this connection, this health service, it just went down. I got to go look and stare at that. So it does, to some degree, it can run on its own. Going back to your earlier point where it can't run on its own, it's like to some degree it can run on its own if you have these alerts and if you're maintaining and running those tests to make sure that individual participants are remaining conformant to the underlying standards. And then it becomes an incredible superpower and you get all those benefits you're looking for. The super low cost of implementation, the super low cost of maintenance, the security and the confidence in that security, as well as having the interoperability that we'd all be looking for. And that's at all the levels that Chris was characterizing. So whether you're just deploying it within the confines of a single enterprise or government department, or whether it's across the country or the region or the world, the same principles apply. You have to test everyone who's taking part of it, and the standards are a critical underpinning for your ability to do that.
Thanks, Gail. Anita, I'm coming back to you, and there I have 2 points about this. I'd like, one is, I don't know whether you have any number in terms of economics about what this interoperability, these standards create in terms of savings for governments. That would be my. Gail was mentioning, for example, the testing that you have to do on as an ongoing operation to ensure that your continuous compliance is. How does that look like in practice? What is the governance or the operational authority like? what is it like?
Yeah, so for this UPI, the payment open specifications and the DPI of payments, Unified Payment Interface, it has saved, according to a WEF report, almost 67 billion since its inception 2016. And if you look at the World Bank's DPI report, it lists a few, again, numbers, saying that the cost of payments disbursement in Zambia went down from 4% to 2.8%. And similarly in Turkey, in the social protection sector, the number of documents required to be submitted by citizens went down from 17 to 1. So, and that report you can see more references.
17 to 1.
17
to 1.
Yes, 17 to 1. And during COVID, the reached 3 times with DPIs versus those without DPIs. So inclusion, coverage, and simplification of process, everything is benefiting apart from economic benefits.
And in terms of how you conduct these tests, how do you do it in practice? And how do you ensure that when you issue a standard, whoever is implementing it remains compliant?
Yeah, so here I think there are a couple of aspects depending on the type of standard. One is, I believe the private sector wants competition. So the private sector would want their product to be certified as compliant to standard and ready to ship and get implemented in a country. They don't want to take the effort of proving that my system is compliant. It takes 3 months. So there are certifying authorities. So there are open tests like Gail mentioned. You provide open source tests by which people can do a self-certificate required. Different models emerge across the industry.
So like Gail, what you're saying is that basically the buy side here needs to organize in order to be able to test or certify the compliance of its...
Most importantly would be those stakeholders who have control, who own an ecosystem, who are the ultimate accountable authorities. You need to make sure that you have appropriate governance in place and that your processes are solid from the beginning, and that includes right up at the beginning with the RFP that Chris is mentioning. You want to make sure you're incorporating standards where you can. You're incorporating emerging products and capabilities, you know, whether they're private sector or open source. Like if they're cutting edge and there isn't a standard yet, fair play, right? But you should be having that watching brief, I don't know, watching like a hawk for when is there a standard, or could you help contribute to the development of a standard to lift all the ships around you and lean into that interoperability we're trying to get to.
All right. Stephanie, very quickly, because we have very little time left, how do you go about testing standards? Is this something that we have mentioned the standard body-led standards versus product-led? How do your standards apply to proprietary products? How would they apply to DPGs? How do you go about testing them?
The way we go about it is the same open source or proprietary. I mean, it's a qualification program, as I mentioned earlier, and it's another organization doing it for us. You know, so we have, you know, we don't manage anything. We have developed the test plan with another, you know, a partner. The community has developed the plan, but it's another organization that really tests all the products, and they can be open source or proprietary, it doesn't matter. I mean, we are testing the interoperability, and you get qualified.
Thank you. So we have only 1 minute left, and I'm gonna, Gal, this is gonna be for you. 2 things here. How do you see in practice the metrics that would, what does good look like? And how do you see the future in this area of interoperability, standards, and governance?
Yeah, so the way that I've described it when I've talked about this theme in the City Hub context, which Stephanie mentioned, is like we need to have a shared goal. Like, where are we all heading towards? My personal view is that it's 8 billion plus people on the planet having the ability to be able to interoperate with their digital identity credentials. And so if that were an agreed mutual shared goal, we might have different ways on how we get there, but we need to have a common agreement on the goal, and we need 3 things, 3 building blocks to achieve it. One is going to be standards. You simply can't get there without standards. Some of those standards might have interfaces with each other and ways of aligning trust frameworks and so forth, but you ultimately need to have the standards. You need to have testing, certification, and conformance that's credible on all parts of that ecosystem that I was mentioning. And you have to have metrics. And these are not metrics that are specific to a funding flow, like the money flows down from the Gates Foundation or from UNDP, or it is a private sector entity that's garnered some funding. Wherever the funding is coming from, that should be agnostic to what are our collective metrics for success. And I equate this to like accounting GAAP rules. We don't debate over what is the definition of revenue or what is it to have a tax income. Like, we don't debate over that. You might dispute how it was calculated in a particular country and some of the sources, but we don't debate over the definition. So I think we need to, as a community, agree on what those metrics of success are to achieve our end goals, and then collectively measure ourselves against it instead of having our silos within our private companies or private initiatives or public initiatives where they're all divergent and we can't even speak the same language and measure our progress against that end goal.
Thanks a lot, Gail. Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Chris. This is great feedback. I'm going to sum up the key takeaways. So thank you again. I'm going to summarize the key takeaways and invite my next panel. At the very beginning, inception of your program, when you're going to procure your systems, when you're going to build your systems, you have to refer back to these standards, understand them, and implement them. As we've seen, the fact that you do implement standards, regardless of whether you're a DPG or not, is going to create great savings. It is what is going to give you control of your system and the ability to switch vendors as needed. My next panel is going to be also on the practical side, is going to be about taking your DPG project or your vendor project and, this is not moving, and about how we scale these into entire ecosystems. So the panelists are Godfrey Kutumela, from the MyFOS initiative. You're the DPI go-to-market. Sarav Bhattarai from OpenMS. Next one is the Ramesh Narayan from CTO Mozip. Andrew Samoa from the Marches ID group. And last but not least, Yan Buan from Midacto. So, Sarav, I'll start with you, actually. So, if you could briefly introduce OpenMS, tell us a little bit about how you think of DPGs, how you think of DPIs, maybe make a distinction of, actually that was one of the questions we had from the audience, make a distinction between the two. How do you measure success when it comes to one of these projects?
Sure, thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. So just to give that governments or anyone can use to manage various social protection programs, and it's designed to manage social protection programs across the delivery chain, the social protection delivery chain, as well as various different programs as well, so things like health insurance to cash transfers, or even just acting as registries, or to manage voucher schemes. So it's a tool that helps whoever is implementing it manage these various programs, mostly a back office tool. And when we, on your question on now we said like DPG is, in my opinion, looking at software immediately. It's about how you set up your infrastructure and your frameworks within your AI infrastructural pieces. So DPG is more software, DPI is more conceptual in nature. Also to the point of why are we talking about DPGs? And it's also because a lot of the need has come out from partner countries around sustainability of digitalization. So I think success of DPG should really be looked at from a sustainability angle. And for us at OpenIMIS, we look at it from two aspects. You know, one, at the country level, and then at the global level as an initiative to manage the global workings of a DPG. That the government or the social protection program operator needs. You know, that's true for a proprietary tool. The thing for sustainability around DPGs is really around ecosystem. Like, is there already or is there an opportunity to create an ecosystem around it? How many vendors are there for the DPG? What are linkages with academia? Because that's how we believe the market will slowly start to grow, because you need new computer science. The knowledge around it is free, and then they can develop their expertise around it. So for a DPG to be successful in country, there should be links to academia, and for that there needs to be documentation on the product as well as a lot of other information for onboarding. And then we just talked about standards before on the panel before, and also a look at what standards are being used in country and how compatible the DPGs are. We have an example from one of our implementations in Nepal, where OpenIMIS is being used to manage the national health insurance of the country, where OpenIMIS uses an internationally accepted open standard in health called the HL7 FHIR, but there were no vendors of other tools that needed to interoperate with OpenIMIS to send medical claims that used the standard. So for OpenIMIS as a community, in the in-country community as well as the global community, it was very important that we even trade ecosystem, because for us, the DPG doesn't sustain if there's no ecosystem. So it's really, so we had efforts in Nepal where vendors of other software products that needed to operate with the national health insurance were trained on a particular internationally accepted standard. So that, yes, we need to adopt international standards, but there is also a responsibility to help the standards grow as well, because if the standards aren't adopted, it's, well, not going to remain a standard. And just on that, at the global, and just as managing a DPG, I think governance is very important. How is the governance structure of a DPG structured? How are stakeholders represented in the DPG? It shouldn't be just one, a DPG being created by someone or an entity and then licensed as open source, but how do we listen to the various users? We have, let's say we have 50 implementations in countries. How are those, the voices, also through voices, their DPGs, particularly at a global, the DPG forward and drive the community forward and build a very viable ecosystem as well. But we also have to maintain that we're not oversteering or controlling the rest of the implementers, because a DPG, it's a global good. It's a digital to make sure that ownership of the DPG is really broad. Thanks.
Thank you, Saurav. And I like the point you're making. There's this kind of distinction about DPI not necessarily being about software, and DPG as a building block, which is essentially about building community about this product, and that community can include all sorts of factors of the ecosystem. And we'll come back to the point of the participation of academia, which is very often understated in these forums. Godfrey, I'll move to you. You have, so DPIs are often seen as basically, the shortcut says DPIs are about three things. They're the digital identity, digital payments, and data exchange. In this panel, you do represent the digital payment perspective, if I may say. You are one of the leaders of the MIFOS initiative, so if you could tell us more about this and how basically it provides an...
Okay, this one works. Thanks, Kaini, for the introduction. And yes, we play in the value system for the DPI. So as a payment-focused DPIs, we actually cut across the DPI world and the private sector world. Payments, across the globe, they've been kind of like seen as a private sector. Next empowerment after getting an ID is just to make sure that it's usable. And one of those big usable use cases is payment. As we moved into the DPI space, we get certified as a DPG by a DPIG Alliance. And that's actually set us as being fit. It is heavily regulated. And we like to take that experience into the ID industry and say, as the ID industry, able to take advantage of the features you bring. Things like shareable identity. So in the payment ecosystem, all what we care about is KYC. So if we get my KYC information, we put it in the system, then we actually get the payments to go. Then the features that we put on top of that, we will wait for the regulations. We would say, yes, we can use additional features, but that the regulations allow. So our advice to the approach from a regulation perspective for digital identities, for other social protection identities is define the requirements and make sure that they'll say, what is the legal basis and framework for me to integrate this further? So we have that experience, and we just want to make sure that as we go forward, we need to be integrated on, like we have seen several instances in Kenya, a lot more reset of digital identity project being taken to court. But with that experience that we have from financial industry, we will say we need to align the requirements across all the DPGs, building DPIs, and we need to make sure that we speak the same language as ecosystem providers. I'll just end there for now. Thank you.
Godfrey said that a banking infrastructure, a telco infrastructure, do not collapse the moment donors leave into the legal identity sector so that the legal identity sector gets the same resilience.
So that's a great point. So last for a very long time. These are the infrastructures that, should they collapse, the economy will be impacted, right? So, and that's why the approach to it is we need to make sure that it is not reliant on one element of what we're doing, the payment industry. It is balanced across what will be the kind of like involvement of the users. And from a digital payment perspective, we like to get, a more robust framework to be extended into the digital ID space. The digital ID space is quite new and is actually more regulated on the government side. There's a little bit more less regular ID, which was created in most countries over 100 years ago and over 50 years ago. Those regulations needs to be kind of like harmonized with the existing foundation of the regulation in the digital identity space. We take that and expand it in across other levels. Telco is one good example, wherein the telco industry entered the financial in terms of how far can they go, in providing financial services within the telco space.
Can you give us a tangible example on electricity, internet, whatever? What services can you or can you not give if, depending on the existing physical infrastructure, for example?
So let's take an example, the more driven by standards. And everybody who wants to participate in that grid will have to meet the standards. Even we're here from different world, over 120 countries, we're able to plug this to move towards, to make sure that it is unified and globally speaks the same language. I like Gail when he says, across the world we know what is revenue. When you talk KYC, it should be very common that what KYC consists of. So once we get that level of, will, quickly be compatible with what can be done in Brazil, for instance. So that type of approach to, getting, the regulations, the language.
So it's fascinating because this again goes into the direction of saying whenever you want to implement an act on the different areas and regulation, just like for the previous panel we were mentioning standards, governance, interoperability, move to a case study here, which I absolutely find fascinating, Andrew. The way the Margins ID group, to start with, is something that's not very often part of the culture of the public sector, and that's the concept of productive failure. Can we start with that? How failure was a positive thing?
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Asamoah. I'm the Executive Director of Systems Integration at the Margins ID Group. We started talking to the government about 30 years ago about ID. That's in 1995. We had various conversations. 2006, the government then initiated a project. At this time, we had built a factory, a secure document ID factory, which could produce, let's say, supply the cards for the identity project. So this project was a typical purchase and supply project to register about 4 million cards and issued 900. And the project ended. So, and of course, the failure.
Understanding is that the cost per card was absolutely astronomical.
Yes, so if you look at that project in terms of an output, the government spent about $100 million per card.
So if the project had stopped there, we could think of it as a disaster. But
Yes.
the great thing is
also our belief that this ID ecosystem could work. And so we then approached the government with a different framework. Basically, it's like on a 3-tier. You have a legal, policy, and technical parts to the project. It needs to be in place for an efficient. These are the outcomes that the government was looking for: political inclusion. They didn't want the same printing cards, and obviously because people are moving around in their daily lives, then they are very difficult to find. So one of the policy objectives was to go meet the people and issue the card on the spot. So basically, registration process, like an interview, processing, and then card issuance. And also the card had to be a secure smart card. Other policy objectives included making this financially feasible, i.e. change the organization, the National Identification Authority, from a cost organization into a revenue-generating organization. I mean, these are just a few of the policy objectives.
So just to make sure everyone understands things right, you had this big this project which was built top-down. It failed, it made no economic sense to the point where it was canceled. But as a subcontractor, you learned many lessons, and you said, we can take this financial risk ourselves. We can share this financial risk and go to the government, propose this public-private partnership where, sharing the risk with the government, we could implement a viable DPI pillar program.
Yeah, so effectively, I mean, in a PPP situation, the government is asking a private party to help them to provide a service. Now, normally, then the private party, in providing that service, is going to pre-finance the government. In a sense, the government didn't want to go and spend all that money again and fail. So basically, we had to finance what we say we believed in. And then the government would also finance the operations, i.e. the going into the field to do the registration and the card issuance. So we had to take on, if you like, the risk that we said we could handle, and also put our money where our mouth was. Okay, so that was obviously very different from the standard vendor approach, where we say we've got a fantastic solution, buy it. If it doesn't work, come again. You understand? So we we put our money where our mouth is. So that also gave us additional impetus to ensure that the project will succeed. So to give you a comparison, the previous project issued only 900,000 cards. In our first year of operation, we issued 15.7 million cards, right? So if in terms of a scalability, you're talking almost like 14 times the amount of production compared
14.
to over 10 years for the previous project in 1 year.
14.
No, I'm saying in terms of output, it's like 14-fold increase in output compared to what happened over 10 years. We did that in 1 year.
That's absolutely amazing. Thanks, Andrew. Ramesh, you have a similar story. I don't know whether you really need to introduce MOSIP. So for those who participate, maybe for the first time, maybe a 5 seconds description of MOSIP. But then what's really interesting in your story is that there is a very similar story of experimentation at the beginning. Your first live, your oldest live instance in the Philippines started a little bit like Andrew's, not necessarily by a failure, but by a team trying things, experimenting. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure, thanks Shaheen. I work for MOSIP. MOSIP is an open source identity platform solution. It's one of the DPGs that we've been talking about. We are hosted in an academic institute, IIIT Bangalore, based out of India, but our team is global. We work with many universities across the globe also. Thankfully, we are not building rockets. When I saw Shaheen's earlier slide, the beginning, I was like, oh my God, we don't have people's lives in the hands. What we are doing is more like building roads. We have to make sure that the roads are good quality, don't have potholes. There are processes that can be in place to check things. And what are these processes, right, to make things right? I think that was a journey of discovery that we had in our first implementation with the Philippines. We have been creating the software and updating it for some time. Philippines, as an early adopter, took one of the versions which we had tested and released. And a team in the Philippines itself started the implementation. They set up and maintained a sandbox, and they started their registration. So they registered a few people. In fact, the sandbox that they created, the initial environment, they registered close to 30 million people in that. And then in parallel, they were procuring their system integrator to support them to scale it up further. And as part of the procurement process, the Philippines was also learning about what works and what doesn't work. And they had an RFP, they got a vendor, systems were put in place, but then as they were operationalizing it, they started discovering challenges. Now, in order to respond to those challenges in time, they needed a lot of flexibility. The modularity with which we built MOSIP and the fact that it was open source code and anybody could come in and plug in things helped actually the Philippines to adopt additional modules without going through complex and time-consuming procurement process. A classic example is that when their physical card issuance became really slow, they decided that in order to be able to give access to services, they needed a digital version, purely digital version of the identity to be delivered to people. So they picked up one of the modules that we had, and their internal team worked on it, made it to their context, and released what is called as the e-fill ID. So the e-fill ID was issued to 50 million people, and they covered the gap between the physical card issuance and the people who didn't get the issuance through these mechanisms.
So, sorry, so what I find interesting is that there are two approaches here. There's the approach where Andrew's group, Margin ID Group, started as a subcontractor. This is a vendor that established a public-private partnership. And then there's the approach where here you have a government who started in-house, building a team that plays or experiments with your stack, basically. And it's only after they have experimented through the stack that they came to you because they were hitting some walls and they needed your support to basically make it production grade.
Absolutely, and that has been the case even in Ethiopia, where Ethiopia, their internal team, the FIDA team, actually picked up MOSEP, experimented with it, they decided to go with it, and largely it is being driven by their own internal capacity, which they are augmenting through support from the ecosystem that's available. And I believe it's very important that internal capacity be available in the governments that are procuring, at least to know what they want and how to manage it. Even if they are getting a lot of external support, it's important that they understand what systems they are dealing with. And I think that's where our efforts in capacity building, our academic partnerships with Alan Turing Institute, the Upanzi Network and CMU in Africa, the University of Philippines, the UM6P in Morocco, all of these actually come into play to help build capacity. Building a DPI is not, as you mentioned, some magical thing. Just because we have put some code on GitHub doesn't mean that it's going to be succeeding. It's like our job as a DPG is to make sure that we offer a good egg, but somebody else has to make the omelette. And making the omelette is a process, and it involves a lot of other aspects. And I think that's where, whether it is our friend here, Andrew, or other ecosystem players, they have a huge role to actually make sure that things are done right.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, you're providing me with a great hook actually on the academia thing. So Sarav briefly mentioned it early, and I'll come back to you, Sarav, on this too. The academia, I would like, it's something that we almost never talk about when we implement these DPG or DPI projects, the role of academia and their importance in these ecosystems. Can you elaborate on that, Ramesh?
I think world over, academia has played a critical role. I think even in your own slide, you talked about how fundamental research has been happening at universities, maybe even with government support, and then subsequently taken to the market by the ecosystem. Even in India, we have had several cases where the digitalization of government has been done with consulting and oversight and help from academia. A lot of times the difference between a good implementation and bad implementation comes from neutral advice with outcome in mind. And I think academia is ideally positioned to be able to play that neutral role, where they are not interested in the gains that they have, but they are interested in the success. They are invested in the success of the work.
And that's an important point, because in the case of MOSEP, for example, you have a whole ecosystem of both vendors and academia around your DPG. And obviously, vendors will be vendors, and academia here has direct relationship with the government, or how does it work in practice exactly?
See, we essentially offer what I would like to think of as a safety net. We are there, we have a great ecosystem who will actually do what is required. But in case you do need additional help, we are here, right? We just offer that additional modicum of support.
So basically they offer a pool of consultants, or how does it work exactly?
So we do technical advisory, we can help them review, and in case they do ask us, we can actually advise them on how to extend the system. We offer training to their people so that they have sufficient capacity in-house. So that's largely our focus, and we also offer what we term as L3 support, which can ideally even come from the industry, where in case you really need some core change, very important change in the core of the platform, we are actually willing to do that.
And Sarah, you mentioned a very similar point on the role of academia here. Can you elaborate briefly on how academia also plays a key role in growing your community around OpenMS?
Sure, and very much in line with what Ramesh just said in terms of academia playing a very big role in neutrality and helping in research. we're looking at it more from a very practical side, as in there needs to be, when we're talking about using DPGs as DPI, and DPI, well, from the nature of it, if it's infrastructure, we need people to work on using it to build other things, and we need innovation, and they're working with academia to make sure that the next generation of computer scientists that come out from in that country are aware of the DPIs being used in the country, so that innovation is accelerated. No, of course, they can graduate from the schools of computer science and join private industry and then get training. But to accelerate that progress, because for example, one practical thing that we do in some countries is if there is let's say a health insurance curriculum in the School of Public Health, they use OpenIMIS to simulate the health insurance and teach them, so that when the graduates are out of college, they already understand how the system works, and the computer science students also understand how to develop on top of it. You know? So I think from both a research angle and the neutrality angle, but also from a very practical angle, to develop the next generation of the workforce that can really accelerate digital development in the country. The academia is a stakeholder that, like you said, is not talked about a lot, but we shouldn't miss.
And that's absolutely critical. I mean, that digital gap I showed at the beginning of this of the first session shows also the lack of human resource pools that we can find in many areas of Africa. The fact that we can put this academia to use compensates for the many engineers that actually go to the more developed, the global north, if I may call it that way, because there are many great engineers trained in Africa, but who end up leaving. So that constant connection and integration with academia is absolutely key, as you mentioned very well, Saurav, to produce the next generation. You're all different actors of the ecosystem here, which is something I love about this panel, because you bring different perspectives. Jan, you are head in IDACTO. Maybe you want to introduce briefly IDACTO. I'm moving, because we present academia, we mentioned the role of government and regulations in this ecosystem. We mentioned the role with Andrew of local, national vendors. I would like to talk about these international vendors, like IDACTO, who are present in many places, and how they can actually help governments build resilient infrastructures. I'm thinking about how do actually, as a vendor, support governments to ensure that they don't get vendor locked.
So to introduce IDACTO briefly, we created IDACTO to help build digital ecosystems. I spent years selling ID cards with chips. They're very nice technology. Actually, probably the biggest success, if you look around, it's underestimated, but today it's the best way to share your ID. It's the most successful technology to share your ID. You have it in all your passports and in a lot of ID cards around the world, and you have a standard way to exchange this. So any ICAO document today, and there are billions of them, can be read by anybody to prove their ID. So that was quite a success, but that's as far as it got. Most governments never actually made use of this, right? And in terms of passports, there was great usage, but at a national level, using the cards, there was nothing. There was no solution proposed to actually access this information and to easily integrate it. It was a DLL, some open source, some proprietary, but DLLs that allowed you to build on top, but no one knew how to do it. So the idea was how do we actually make this useful? How do we build an ecosystem that people can build on quickly? And so we leveraged more standards to do this. We started with OpenID Connect, because everybody uses OpenID Connect, right? It's a Google button, where on all the websites, Facebook button, that's all OpenID Connect. All the developers have this. WordPress has a plugin for OpenID Connect. You just put in your URL, super fast. You have this deployed. All the banks are using this for open banking. I think Gail mentioned FAPI. So you have specific profiles just for that. So all this is available. You don't need to reinvent everything. You need to foster adoption and provide the tools to adopt this very quickly. So this is a promise that we built Adacto on. We worked on it, actually, we worked on it with Morocco, because Morocco had an ID card with a chip in it for 20 years. Sorry, I'm exaggerating, for 10, sorry, the chip. But no one ever read it. Even the police didn't use its tools to read the chip. And it was, I think, the first contactless national ID card in the world, and it had fingerprints matched on the card. So high technology, very useful, never used. So we spoke with Morocco and helped them get a digital ID vision and explain to them how you can leverage these standards to promote adoption, and then you can have a vision where you go step by step and you attack use cases one by one. So this is what City Hub's doing, trying to find cross-border use cases and focusing on the most useful one, the one that will foster adoption. That's what we did in Morocco. We tried to see, first of all, you know, how can we get the flywheel going? How can we make a government use case that ensures that people access and use actually get an ID card, and then how do we have enough of a population to create a use case where it's almost mandatory? You can mandate that people use this ID card, and then you create this kind of flywheel. The government use case now made it necessary, so you have private actors and other actors who find this very interesting and start building other use cases. And then you have even people who say, hey, this is great, it's a digital ID, can I add my data on it? And then you get a real flywheel around a wallet. That's what we're building. That's what we built in Morocco with small use cases. I think one of the first major mandated use cases was online registration in education. And we did it's the same approach in France. So in France we have the EU wallet initiative. Everybody comes and says, okay, did you implement this standard, this standard, this standard? I'm like, okay, I love standards. They're great, but let's focus on, you know, how do we get this adopted? France didn't have a digital ID for over 20 years. Every new politician that came said, oh no, this is too dangerous, let's stop. So we had many initiatives, none of them launched. Same type of things you see in Africa. You launch one, then elections, boom, you shut it down. It was the same in France. So the objective in France was, let's get this going. Let's get this standard-based, but let's get this going fast. So we focused on key use cases that would grow the ecosystem and grow the need. Because just having the EU say, you need this, I mean, if you've spoken to the French, they will tell you, yeah, we don't care about the EU, they will do whatever we want. Which is never the case, by the way. But that's what they think. So anyways, that's how we built, so for the French, we did the same thing. We started with very focused use cases. So we hooked into existing ID systems, but made it level high. So we made it the first French level high ID that can be used at the European level, but that can also be used for specific cases that you could never do online legally in France, which is if you want to register, if you cannot vote, you can have a proxy vote for you. And so now you can do this online thanks to this specific use case. And the great thing is, last year we had many elections in France because they canceled the government and all of those things. So that was great for adoption, and we picked the perfect case.
So thanks, Jan. That's a great and important role as a vendor to say you basically, what I hear from what you say, you just serve two purposes. One is that you cross-pollinate different practices from one country to another as an international vendor. The other one is that you drive innovation for additional use cases beyond the ID. As the previous panel was mentioning, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I was dreaming about having a digital ID. It's the use cases around that digital ID that give it value. And as private sector vendors, your vested interest is to ensure that your digital IDs are used in more use cases. Andrew, you have a very interesting story to tell also about how you scaled up this part. Once you established the ID in Ghana, how you started looking for new opportunities.
Okay, so as part of the design of the ecosystem, and also because of the nature of the PPP, we needed to look at how was it going to be used, how was it going to be useful within the ecosystem. And so the framework included an initial set of off-takers. These are government services that would use this ID. So for example, you had people like the National Health, the GRA, the Government Revenue Authority, the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority, and some others. Aside from the revenue, the point was to help to clean up all of these existing silos. Every country has multiple silos of data, and the main issue is trust. You cannot trust these silos of data because you couldn't really control what was going into it. So it was a kind of like a double-pronged attack. One was to get the enrollment registration up very quickly so that it became useful to services across the whole ecosystem. So that way people knew that they had, if they were providing service to somebody, the likelihood of that person being in the system was very high. So that is why we ramped up very quickly to ensure that we had a certain threshold of people within the system. And then, as I said, the services that people were used to giving, they became much more convenient. Instead of filling in forms, they would just take their picture, the ID number, or there were different modes of interacting with the national ID system. So then they didn't have to fill in any forms for personal data. So you could walk into a bank, you can go to a telco, all these multiple contact points, and then you can do the identity verification within a second. And so that helped with the transition from the old world into the new world.
So that's a great perspective where we can see that here you saw it through the ability to improve processes in the various areas. You saw opportunities, and that was aligned with the government's incentive, with the government's direction. We're a little bit short of time, so I'm going to make it relatively quick here, but there's an important point. We've mentioned the role of different actors in the ecosystem here. Godfrey, I would like to come back to you and briefly on licensing, because we've been talking with Jan and Andrew about what promoted innovation. And you have a very interesting choice, and I'll go to Saurav about, because they've made quite a different choice here. You have a quite interesting choice of licensing for your open source, and I would like you to relate basically how that promoted or did not promote innovation, basically.
Thanks for that. So when we started, just like MOSIP and OpenLMS, there was a university involvement. On our side, the involvement of the universities was in validating the feasibility study that we did, so that what we built as a resultant product is addressing a need. So from the feasibility study, we wanted to make sure that we get the academias, we get the innovators involved. The initial advice, that we went for was to go for a very permissive license, an open source license that will allow the private sector to be able to participate in the ecosystem, because our ecosystem, we wanted to make sure that it include everybody that is involved in the payment industry. Private sector are prominently involved, the researchers are involved, the academics, independent researchers, academic researchers. So that, choice was actually driven by the need to, balance, between all the actors that are involved. And today when we look back, we've been in this for 20 years. Today when we look back, we started on MIT license, and pretty quickly we got an advice to move it into Aperture, and we use it to join the Aperture Foundation as an open source.
So just to explain to the audience, because not everyone understands the different types of licenses, I mentioned it earlier during the presentation, that you have two types of I'm very grossly simplifying here, but you
Yeah.
have two types of licenses. You have the permissive ones, which basically say you can do whatever you want with my intellectual property, including rebranding it and reselling it.
Yeah.
And that's the type of license you have basically chosen. And then there, which is sort of creating an ecosystem. How many vendors or adapters do you have?
To date, we have over 600 implementation, and this is really across the board.
Fintech
So
startups.
yes, this is small startups, fintechs, state-owned banks, micro lenders. You know, the use cases are around, you know, savings and lending. So those are the two main use cases. So out of all the implementation we've seen, most of them, they like the fact that they could, you know, use the code, modify it without the restrictions of a copyleft license. So they
Okay.
could own the resultant IP. And whenever they choose, they can commoditize that, right? They can build a feature that innovate on our platform and donate it back, you know, in order to commoditize it. So that freedom of using, modifying without having to, you know, or, you know, having to go through a complicated legal process was actually very useful. For a DPI specifically, you know, part of what the DPI aims to do is inclusivity, you know, across the, you know, the world. So the license that we use, Apache Foundation, allows anything and everything to be done, including notices and attributions to be in the local language, right? Versus if you take any other copyleft license, any less restrictive license, you will still be restricted to certain things. So this freedoms that we saw in our choice of the language is what really kind of like made the adoptions to be much more greater and get the collaborations across the industry much more easier.
Thanks, Godfrey. We're short on time. So, Saurav, you took a very different perspective on this and mentioned how copyleft could mean very different things, maybe even legal uncertainty. And I find your perspective very interesting, and so if you could share it.
Absolutely. So in OpenIMIS, we took exactly the other end of the spectrum. No, we're licensed as AGPL version 3, a very copyleft license. And there are a few factors that play on why.
Just to briefly, technically explain what AGPL is the most copyleft license, which basically mandates that if you consume, and maybe there are some legal nuances there, but if you consume that software, then your software could also mean that it has to be AGPL2, which means you need to publish your source code, etc.
Exactly, and I think that is the point. No, there are legal nuances to this, and I wouldn't want to trivialize it and say AGPL does not allow, because there are words in the text which says whichever tool or software links to AGPL should also publish its source. But I think there's a lot of debate, and similar to any legal text, interpretation is key, and we need to get more clarity as a DPG and a DPI community on things like, what does that word link mean? Does that mean accessing an API? Some might want to think that, but there are legal experts who are trying to interpret it in the best possible way. So I wouldn't want to bluntly say that it is causing a problem, but we're at OpenIMIS, we're looking into it very deeply and engaging with legal experts to really get the interpretation out so that governments can really make a decision. But also for us, one of the reasons why we chose that was, one, the tool that is being developed, OpenIMIS, is really being used by governments to provide social protection to their citizens. And we didn't want a scenario where the digital tool, there are derivatives of it which become proprietary, and then there are problems on the use of the tool. And then secondly, it was a very simple thing. OpenIMIS was developed using public money, and it still is. And it was it made it easy to make the decision that if it's developed using public money, then it should be very public in nature as well.
So thanks. This was just a small glimpse into the technicals of selecting your DPGs, how you build the ecosystems. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I still had quite a few questions for Jan, Ramesh, and the whole panel actually, about how you go and build the ecosystem. This is also a topic that we could elaborate on for hours. I would like to, I'll summarize the key takeaways. I would like to thank the panel and a big round of applause for them. Outsourcing to private sector, whether based on DPG or not, by the way, and what proportion of it you want to build internally, depending on the capacity you have, the role of academia in this, and we've seen some of the technical details of how it's not just about downloading again source code. You really need to have some serious discussions and take the time to do this planning around implementing your DPI projects to get it right and make sure you don't end up in some of these big failure situations. So thank you again, and we'll move to the next session, I guess.
Africa and microsafe computing, where we embark in this journey to developing capacities in ID, but also in the general framework of DPI in the continent. What is our motivation, actually? And we'll get back to this when we introduce the ID Hackathon, so the Africa ID Hackathon, in a minute. But as we are embarking in this digital world, as the continent is digitalizing itself, if we do not have the capacity to own the technology, to be able to drive the transformation in the continent, I am saying that we are selling ourselves for failure. We will not succeed the digital transformation if we don't have the capacity to own, develop, and maintain these technologies in the continent. So that is the main objective that we have in this journey. So the Upanzi network is a network of research lab. We are supported by the Gates Foundation, and the aim here is to work toward a secure, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable digital transformation of Africa. How do we do this? Is through research, capacity building, and outreach, and knowledge transfer and sharing. We'll get back to that in a minute. So it is a network that is hosted at Carnegie Mellon University in Rwanda, but we have at this time 5 members, CMU Africa included. We are just welcoming our newest member, which is the LASPAD lab from Gaston Berger University in Senegal. Previously, we had the University of Botswana, Wits University, and Al Akhawain University within the network. So, as I said, we work on research, capacity building, and outreach. So in terms of research, the main theme of the network is on DPI and DPGs. And there we do a lot of things. Of course, security, we have been talking about why security is important as we are moving in the digital world. Of course, moving digital means that I give someone the ability to put my country on its knees by just clicking in a button. That's how serious it is. I'm going maybe too far, but that's what's happening. Data is important. We have been talking about how to generate, how to store, how to exchange, and how to move data. This is important also in the network part of what we are doing. And we work on connectivity, we work on some verticals on health, climate, and of course in the intersection of technology and society. And in terms of capacity building, we have a number of activities, but one that we would like to talk about today is the Digital ID Hackathon. And for that, I would like to invite my colleague, Andrew Musoke, to give you some insight about this ID Hackathon. Andrew?
Right, thank you, Hassan, and good evening, everyone. I know that you're exhausted, it's late, so just stay with me. I'll guide you into the rest of the program. So, Digital ID Hackathon Africa. Before I talk about that, I'd like to take a few steps back. And thank you, Hassan, for setting the tone. He has talked about Africa increasingly getting digital, and with this, the prevalence of digital identity as well, right? And questions do come to mind. The first is when we build these systems, or more frankly, buy them, who is going to maintain them? Who's going to update the technology, right? And as I've been walking through this gathering, I've been struggling to find Africa-led companies that are developing solutions for digital identity systems. So, and that is a question on local capacity. Second question is, it's about use case development. Who exactly are we building these systems for? Is digital identity for governance, or is digital identity or ID systems for the people, right? When I think about, randomly, Mukwaya from Nakasongola village somewhere, when he wakes up in the morning, he doesn't care about the latest innovation in cryptography or AI-enabled biometrics. One question on his mind is, how does my life improve? That is a question of value-driven use cases. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the Digital ID Hackathon Africa. This is an initiative of Upanzi in partnership with Microsoft Consulting. And this is a competition platform that allows Africa's most brilliant minds, the youth, to come up with contextually relevant solutions to problems that they themselves face in their communities. How does the hackathon work? This has been running since September, and it's the first of its kind, if I may say so. And when we launched in September, like I mentioned, and through that, like I mentioned, we're talking about building capacity. So we do not have any we don't have any assumption of the knowledge that these people, the students or the participants have about digital identity. So we start from ground zero. What is digital identity? And we take them through mentored courses and teach them what is digital identity, why is it useful, and how can you develop prototypes that can be adopted in the real world. The first stage is submitting ideas. We get ideas from all over the continent with a regional approach. I'll touch on that later. And then we filter just through some criteria, and out of that we get the most promising ideas, and then these teams move on to the semifinals. Semifinals is just a prototyping stage where we work with different partners all over the ecosystem, whether it's civil society, whether it is private sector, public sector, academia, and so on, to mentor the students or the participants and help them develop their idea into a feasible prototype. And then finally, everyone likes a little bit of money, so we do have awards. It's a competition after all. And for us, we get a couple of very nice photographs at the end of it. What we've done so far, like I mentioned, we took a regional approach, and this is because we're heavy on context. We started in July. From July to September, we piloted with the Eastern region, and that was done, the awards were hosted in Kigali. And then we moved on to North and Southern Africa, which was launched in Morocco in November. And then we launched the Western region shortly after that. And all of those ran until just recently, April, where all the regional awards were issued. So out of that, like I mentioned, we're working with students, but these students, we're looking at university students first. It's the first year that we're doing this, so we need to scope ourselves and show you some results so that you can at least as well appreciate where we're going with this. Out of that, 20 plus countries participated in Africa only. We had over 600 people, students, register onto our platform and submit ideas. We had over 80 idea submissions, and out of that, we are proud to say that we had at least 30% female participation. Thank you. Then just the regional breakdown. Eastern Africa, 5 countries participated. Northern Africa, 4 countries. Western, thank you, Western and Central, 9 countries participated. In the South, we had 5 countries participate. So this is what we have done so far with the Digital ID hackathon. And this is just the beginning. And I implore you to make sure that next time I come on stage, I'm talking about 54 countries. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce, thank you. I'd like to introduce Anshul from Microsoft Consulting to talk about some of the emerging use cases.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. So as Andrew was mentioning, one of the core objectives of this Hackathon Africa is about the use cases. I think all of us in the room can relate to this, that when we do a lot of research and a lot of discussions around ID in Africa, there are 3 major use cases of digital ID. One is, of course, the elections, the financial inclusion, and social protection. So what we have been fortunate of conducting these 4 regional hackathons that we have got fantastic ideas across multiple sectors. So sectors which are extremely important in the African context. So of course, agriculture and climate change, healthcare, education, mobility, public services, property management, and of course, the finance and telecom. So I will try to sum up some of the use cases that we have found, which have been submitted by the university students across various countries from Africa. So these represent the lived experiences of people that they have seen as a child, grown as an adult, and perhaps are even going to face some of them in the future. Sorry. Okay. Of digital ID in Africa is the land registration. So as you know that there's a lot of problems around land ownership across in various countries. So digital ID first and foremost can solve this problem of land ownership once for all. There's a big potential of using digital ID in also providing subsidy to women farmers. So as we know that at least 40% women are employed in agriculture sector. And then of course, there's a lot of important use case of using digital ID in providing equitable access to energy, to inputs, and to market. And why this is particularly important? Because there are at least 250 million smallholder farmers in Africa, and if you do not get equitable access to resources, they will suffer in extreme poverty. And lastly, with the advent of AI, there's a lot of potential of combining ID and AI to provide personalized agriculture recommendations by creating farmers' ID. Now, as we have seen in any use case, it doesn't come with its own challenges. So of course, when we implement the agriculture use case of digital ID, it may also come up in various hurdles. What type of hurdles? So for example, given the complex nature of agriculture, the data accuracies, the outdated databases, the digital divide. So all of these changes are going to happen over the next couple of years, but given the advent of a very strong digital transformation that we see in the continent, many of these challenges can be overcome by having a very coherent strategy and a very practical implementation plan. Sorry, okay. Coming to the healthcare, again, as we know, again in Africa's context, only 3% of the global health workforce is in the continent, while the continent share almost a quarter of the burden of the global disease. So you can see the huge disconnect and the capacity constraints that Africa is facing when it comes to the healthcare. So when I talk about digital ID, so first and foremost is about using the digital ID to create digital health records. Now, many African countries have taken some steps into it, but still there's a far bigger potential that is even left to achieve. The ID can also be used to create an Africa-wide health repository. As we have seen that there are so many disease outbreaks that happens in various parts of the continent at different time frames. So having an Africa-wide health repository can be a near reality if we start using a health ID. And of course, the cross-border vaccination certificate. And I think this is something many of us relate very easily, because when you cross from one country to other, different countries have different vaccination requirements. You still have to carry the physical copies, but having a cross-border vaccination certificate can address this problem once for all. Talking about the challenge, of course, the data protection and data security is the biggest one when it comes to the healthcare. But on the brighter side, many African countries today, and kind of congratulating to all of them, have DPDP, the data protection law that has been enacted over the past 3-4 years. So of course, we have a very strong foundation now of data protection, data security, and now we can use that foundation to use the digital ID to create a new age of healthcare in Africa. Sorry again. Okay. Coming to the mobility part of it. So of course, the driving license, as you have noticed that there are different forms of driving license that are available in different countries and even within states within the same country. And there's a lot of problem of around having multiple driving licenses, having the fake driving licenses. So if we link digital ID to provide driving licenses to people, it will help to create the address the issue of the fake driving license that we see. And also, if the digital ID will also help to have a very verifiable digital driving license, which can be used to use across all the African countries. Of course, it can also be used to have an online ticket booking. Especially when I talk about the low-income segment, we should also realize that it's not easy for people to have multiple passwords. So having having digital ID to use ticket booking, to use Uber, to use ride hailing can be a game changer, because it really helps them to use one single login using ID to access various services. In terms of public services, as we all know that Africa is home to 400 plus million people who are living in extreme poverty even today. And for them, access to public services, it can be a matter of life and death. And again, looking at this through, many ID authorities will agree to me that one of the biggest problems that the government face when it comes to public service is twofold. One, who am I providing service for? Like, can I identify this person? And B, is this person the right person? Or I am providing a benefit to a ghost beneficiary or a wrong beneficiary. So digital ID does a lot of help in identifying the right person and at the right place. It is especially important in the context of refugees and other vulnerable communities that we see in Africa. As we have seen, the people live in the remotest part of the continent, and reaching them is not easy if we do not start using the advantage of digital ID. And of course, there is a new age trend that we see in the continent, where many countries are now building a common service platform to cut down the cost and offer services to citizens and residents in a faster manner. Sorry, again. Can I get another one? Because I think okay, yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, trying. Okay. Yes, okay. So this is the last slide on the use cases. Again, talking about the various other sectors. In education, again, what we are seeing a major problem of the academic certificates. I mean, we can all relate that while in school, while in college, how difficult it was to prove that my degree is authentic, it is not fake. And now the digital ID can actually make it happen to offer verifiable credentials that can be used by various employers and other educational institutes. Same with the attendance and scholarships. I was talking to various people in the morning, and the biggest problem of the school dropouts in Africa, the reason is because you cannot track. A student dropout after high school, after intermediate, there is no way to reach that person because you cannot identify that person. So digital ID can really help to identify those people, provide the benefits at the right time to stop the school dropouts. Same with the employment, where ID can be used for employee verification, for business registration and attendance. Elections, again, one of the major use case in Africa, but this is a distant dream, perhaps, because there's a very strong African diaspora globally. They can also vote remotely using the face auth perhaps in the future. Again, for the property management, and lastly for the finance and telecom, it can also be used for, again, passwordless banking, as we say, the single sign-on, because it's not easy for a lot of people, we should realize, to maintain multiple passwords because of the limited digital literacy. So with that, I would have multiple use cases, but in the interest of time, okay. All right. So in the interest of time, we want to invite the winning teams now to come up on the stage and present the use cases one by one. But I would request all the winning teams to please stand up on the right-hand side. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, these teams have traveled far from the universities and regions all across Africa. And to just say in a one single line to us, they represent the success and the revolution of the digital identity that is happening in the African continent. So with that, I will like to invite the first team on the stage, which is Smart Rise Rwanda.
solution, titled Boss Did, is aimed at helping government to track student loan effectively and creating a sustainable student fund. So in Botswana, close to 2 billion pula was allocated to tertiary funding in 2024, as reported by the Minister of Finance in the last budget speech. Despite this major investment by the government was only able to recover less than half of the 20 million targets that they had set. That is more than 10 million pula unaccounted for. That is money lost and opportunities that numerous students could have benefited from. So the problem stems from the reliance on graduates to take responsibility and accountability of the repayment process, and also the use of possibly outdated contact information that the government needs to locate graduates. Also, government services use time and resources, including hiring costly third-party agencies in order to help them track these graduates. So our solution as Boss Did is to change this problem by streamlining the recovery loan process, by integrating data, national data. So how do we do this? How does our system work? So when a student receives a loan, their digital ID is linked to the loan record in our system. So once they receive employment after graduation, this then means that they're registered under a tax authority and they're issued a tax identification number. So this tax identification number is then linked to their digital ID. So this affiliation on both parties reflects in our system through real-time notifications, which then we're able to use to fast-track the initiation of repayment process. So our users, the government officials, are able to do away with the old, long, tedious, inefficient system of processing repayments. So the degree of confidence in the increase of recovery rates surely should improve significantly due to the reliability of the digital ID, the information that it provides, the up-to-date and reliable contact information of each student. So in conclusion, consider this. Even 1% in increase of recovery rates translates to an improvement in money that is saved by the government and more opportunities provided for potential students. So our solution speaks to one of the very core pillars of many nations here in Africa, which is improving literacy rates and really ensuring that inclusive, quality education is being provided for all young people, regardless of their background. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Esther Sinoya, and I'm from the University of Malawi, from Malawi, together with my colleagues. So today I'm excited to introduce Umodzi RX. It's a solution that leverages digital ID to solve problems in the health sector. So we are going to focus on two critical problems. So the first problem that we'll focus on is fragmentation of medical records. And we'll also look at medication errors. So picture this. Imagine you're a patient, imagine a patient who's been chronically ill for a long time, and all their medical records are stored in a health passport, which is basically just a book that stores all your health records, your medical health records. And you lose that. This means that doctors don't have access to your medical history, like your allergies, your past prescriptions, and your ongoing treatments. And this could lead to a lot of mistakes during prescription. Let's also imagine a pharmacist who receives a prescription from a doctor, and they cannot tell due to an unclear handwriting whether a dosage reads 5 milligrams or 50 milligrams. And slight misreads like that could lead to serious consequences for patients. And so this is where Umodzi RX comes in. Our solution is to include secure use of digital identities so that, for example, for patients, they register via MOSIP, and before they are issued any medication or before they collect any kind of medication, they are verified using the digital IDs. And doctors and pharmacists as well they have role-based access control, meaning that only authorized personnel can prescribe or dispense medication. And we also introduce accountability and transparency by using tamper-proof record keeping. That's all we had for you. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I would like to ask a quick question before we all start. How many of you spent more than 15 minutes at the gate waiting for the security and waiting just for their face to be authenticated? On a raise of hands. Okay, so thank you. It's the same for us. So let me tell you about a quick story of our team. Waiting at the Moroccan airport, we had to wait for more than 30 minutes just to get our identity checked. And that's the issue that we're solving in a nutshell. Our current system is a face authentication system that helps people at the airport to check your identity. So it helps them tell whether it's you or it's not. How do we do it? And how fast do we do it? So we do it using MOSIP eSignet for registration and login. And we also use mobile FaceNet, which is a 99.55% accuracy model. You might ask us questions about the details of it later if you're not sure about the accuracy. So adding to that, we're not like any other face authenticator. So you might ask me a question. So Aya, how is this face authenticator different than any smart gate that's in Dubai, Qatar, which are extremely expensive? And how can we bring this to Africa? Well, my answer to you is that this is an African-centric solution, which means that you do not need a smart gate that is extremely expensive. You just need a camera and you just need a computer. And that's how we help the people at the gate to determine whether it's you or not, which makes the entire process faster, seamless. We do not remove humans, we reduce the human error. And that's our goal, is to help the staff and to also make the staff experience entirely different and entirely happier, to make our users experience entirely different and entirely happier. And we're doing this by not removing the human, having an accurate model, a faster model, and making the lines faster. So hopefully in some few years you'll be able to see some person at the gate using our system that's just telling you you're just there, telling you okay, green line, great, that's you, and nice haircut by the way, you can pass by the gate. So that's it for us, and hopefully you'll see us in some few years. Thank you everyone.
Hello everyone, this is Team Amanar from Morocco. This is Fatem Zara. I'm a Moroccan citizen and I live in Rabat. I have a twin sister, Fatma. She lives in Marrakesh. Well, obviously we are twins. We have the same birth date, we have the same face, exactly the same face. But we also have the same fridge, the same washing machine, and unfortunately the same habit of keeping the lights off. I'm very sorry about that. So, well, you might wonder, when it comes to our electricity bills, they're not twins. The reason is that first, we are distant by few kilometers, but we are also separated by two different private companies or private utility companies. These companies use different rules. Use different rules, they have different prices, and this is the issue with a lot of Moroccans today. That is why, I have some good news for you. In October 1st, 2024, Morocco transitioned to privatizing these institutions, and it is getting away from these outdated private sectors. Today, Morocco is actually giving the full control to La Société Régionale Multiservice, or what we call SRM. SRM now is taking full control of distributing water and electricity. But for La SRM to operate well, it needs a system that is reliable, accurate, and can tell who are the people who are actually in need, and based on the right criteria. That is why today I am introducing NOR ID Plus. It is a simple, accurate, and very smart system. Thanks to NOR ID Plus, me, as a citizen, I am able to log into the system and register using only my national ID. This one, if you've never seen a Moroccan national ID, here is it. So, and using a facial scan or face scan, I can see all the properties in the dashboard. I select the properties that I would like to monitor the energy for, and then voila, a digital energy identity is created. Thanks to this digital identity, I can now have access to real-time data monitoring thanks to a smart dashboard on my device. I can track the energy consumption of my property, and I can also have forecasting data or forecasting future data. Thanks to NOR ID Plus, I can now trust the government with this solution, and the government can trust its system with subsidies allocation. I am today, as a proud Moroccan citizen, presenting to you NOR ID Plus not only as a solution for Moroccans. It is a solution for all Africans present here with us today. It is a solution for farmers, entrepreneurs, house owners. It is a solution from Africa to Africa in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. The next team is Smart Trace from Rwanda.
Good evening, colleagues. Governments in Africa, they are losing money. 30% of what is invested in agricultural input subsidy programs is wasted due to fraud and misallocation of those farm inputs. We are Smart Trace, a team from Rwanda. My name is Thompson Kaisi, and I'm with my colleague Afsanat Ineza. We are from Carnegie Mellon University, Africa. So let's go back to our story. When it comes to fraud, we have people who benefit from agricultural input subsidy programs who doesn't exist. They will never exist. Who are these people? These people are called ghost beneficiaries. Apart from that, when it comes to allocation of subsidized input, for example, fertilizer, it's based on a blanket approach, meaning to say everything fits in one pocket. We don't do a data-driven approach. We don't allocate a farmer based on their needs. For example, I'll give an example of Malawi because I'm from Malawi. So, in Malawi, farmers are given only 2 bags of fertilizer. Imagine a farmer who is looking after maybe a very large family of maybe 10 members. You'd see that that one will not benefit. And someone who doesn't exist, they have just manipulated the input subsidy programs. They have just manipulated. He'll benefit from that way more than even someone who deserves. As a result, we came up with a solution. We are calling it Smart Trace. Our solution provides identity verification when it comes to registration of farmers in the input subsidy programs. And apart from identity verification, we are also providing a targeted approach when it comes to subsidy allocation. We're using this through machine learning in order to provide a data-driven subsidy allocation. When it comes to the solution we developed, it is able to predict with 97% accuracy based on level of income, education, and number of dependencies. So this will help governments to help SDG 1 of poverty reduction. And apart from that, SDG 2 of food security. Thank you.
Thank you. Next team is Farm to Global from Rwanda as well.
Hello. I want to invite you to reflect on an incident that happened late last year in Rwanda, Rusinzi village, where farmers were complaining to their president that they have surplus production of rice, over 3,000 tons of rice, but they're rotting or they're slowly going to waste because of lack of market. And an interesting commentary that appeared during the same incident was that there are other parts of the same country that don't have rice. So the problem that we are seeing here isn't really food scarcity, it is access. And this problem or this story is not unique to just Rwanda. It resonates with millions of other farmers across Africa. My name is Alvina Menja, we're Farm to Global, and it is with this reason that we created Farm to Global, a web platform that connects verified buyers with verified farmers with verified listings. I want to interest you in another statistic. Rwanda alone has 33% of post-harvest loss. And this number extends to 37% across the African continent. Now, this is not just the problem of food wastage, it's also lost opportunity. Farm to Global wants to change that. At the core of our platform, we have integrated digital trust with MOSIP, where farmers and buyers are authenticated. So all users on our platform are verified, so no scams, no impersonations, just real people with real products, offering trust and security beyond the informal marketplaces that exist now. It's easy. Our farmers are onboarded by either regional or country administrators, and they're verified against our MOSIP digital ID. And customers from anywhere in the globe can also sign up and view listings and pay seamlessly in our platform. What does this offer at the end of the day? It allows these farmers to get visibility outside their normal locality, and buyers to be able to connect with people that are verified producers of products. But for all of us here today, it's to reduce waste of food, to improve food security, and most importantly, to have an inclusive market. Farm to Global isn't just another agri-marketplace. It acts as a bridge not just from Rusinzi, Rwanda to Kigali, but from Rwanda to Tanzania, Tanzania to Kenya, hopefully Africa to the world. We aim to transform unknown farmers to verified producers, unlocking the full potential of the essential workforce of our continent, farmers. This is Farm to Global. Thank you.
Our next team is a Francophone team. So if you can't speak both English and French like me, I would advise that you get a casque to be able to listen to the translation. And the team is from Togo. Yes, welcome.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Je suis Drake Natitmai Donald. Je représente ici l'équipe Smart Care. J'aimerais qu'on débute par ce cas concret-ci. Une femme enceinte qui souffre déjà de l'hypertension se rend de toute urgence à l'hôpital pour se faire prendre en charge. N'ayant pas son carnet de santé en main, on lui demande de retourner chercher son carnet de santé avant de retourner. Dans cette situation, faudrait-il qu'elle retourne chercher son carnet avant de revenir? Ceci implique de prendre des risques sur sa vie et sur celle de son enfant. Admettons un instant qu'elle rentre en sécurité à la maison, mais qu'elle ne retrouve pas son carnet de santé. Quelle sera la suite? C'est de là que découlent 3 problèmes que Keiraidi cherche à résoudre. Le premier problème est celui de la disponibilité d'identité médicale numérique. Et ceci est appuyé par la revue africaine des sciences sociales et de la santé qui dit que le taux de digitalisation en santé médicale n'était que de 17,75% en décembre 2024. Le deuxième problème, c'est celui des retards dans la prise en charge. Si cette femme avait son carnet de santé en main, elle n'allait pas avoir ce problème. Et le dernier problème qu'on veut mentionner ici est celui de falsification et de perte de dossiers médicaux. C'est là que Keiraidi intervient. Keiraidi est une solution bien pensée, une application mobile qui permet de stocker, de centraliser tous les dossiers médicaux dans un seul endroit. Keiraidi dispose donc de 3 solutions qui permettent de résoudre ces problèmes. La première solution est celle de la mise à disposition d'une identité médicale numérique. Grâce aux fonctionnalités de Mozip et principalement de eSignet, en combinaison avec un QR code, nous créons des identités numériques pour chaque patient qui pourra ensuite accorder l'accès à son médecin pour lui prendre en charge. La deuxième solution que nous portons est celui de prise en charge rapide. Grâce à notre identité numérique unique, nous permettons la prise en charge rapide des patients. Et la dernière solution, nous faisons une synchronisation qui permettra donc de voir l'historique médical et donc de voir tout ce qui s'est passé pour mieux prendre en charge. Installez donc Keiraidi, sauvez votre vie et sauvez la vie de vos proches. C'était Smart Key, merci.
Thank you. Now the last team. Also, the last team is from Senegal. They also speak French.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je m'appelle Michel Junior Delanou et je représente l'équipe Retro. Et nous venons de l'école polytechnique Jetses au Sénégal. Donc la problématique qu'on essaye de résoudre, c'est une problématique importante. Donc aujourd'hui, on va parler d'un sujet, donc le sang. C'est un sujet qui est vital. Partons par des statistiques. L'OMS nous donne des statistiques suivantes. On constate qu'en Afrique subsaharienne, 537 femmes meurent chaque jour. Et la principale cause, c'est dû à un manque de sang. Aussi, en 2020, nous observons qu'au niveau de 38 pays africains, il y a un déficit de 3 millions d'unités de sang. Face à cette problématique, nous proposons une solution visant à répondre à cela. Parce que nous avons observé, notamment dans notre pays, le Sénégal, que c'est une problématique que les solutions digitales n'ont pas tendance à indexer. Donc notre solution Lifelink vise à connecter, donc à réduire ce déficit-là en connectant les donneurs aux banques de sang, en apportant les informations nécessaires et à temps aux donneurs, en leur permettant en les motivant donc à travers un système de valorisation et de reconnaissance. Notre système va utiliser l'identité numérique pour authentifier les différents acteurs du système, permettre un partage, garantir un partage sécurisé et consenti des informations du donneur, mais également leur permettre d'accéder aux récompenses qu'ils ont gagnées auprès de nos différentes organisations partenaires. En somme, notre solution a aussi plus à proposer. Notamment, nous prévoyons donc dans l'avenir, lorsque les données seront disponibles, de mettre en place une intelligence prédictive permettant de prédire donc les pénuries de sang. Cela va permettre à nos systèmes sanitaires de ne plus avoir une approche réactive face à cette problématique, mais plutôt d'adopter une approche proactive. Aussi, notre solution se veut inclusive et éducative, notamment à travers des fonctionnalités en développement comme des interfaces vocales et l'intégration des langues locales. Donc, en somme, notre équipe rétro, à travers Lifelink, nous essayons de connecter les donneurs, les donneurs et les banques de sang, donc pour permettre donc, de combler ce gap-là qu'il y a et donc de résoudre cette problématique. C'était tout pour notre présentation.
Thank you.
Wow. It's been a journey. When we say from Africa, for Africa, in Africa, this is what we mean, right? Yes, we shall have at the end. Yeah. So this is more than just a hackathon, just another hackathon, right? There are plenty all over the continent, all over the globe. Our main differentiator is we are fiercely intentional about community success. Unfortunately, we need to pick a winner, but for us, the journey doesn't stop there, it's a beginning. Any student who registers on our platform and we get their information, we put them into a community, and it becomes a pool, community of practice. The next innovators, the next engineers, the next entrepreneurs. And unfortunately, I'm not above emotional manipulation. Do not let the youth down, right? We're looking for contributions. This pool needs, it's a pool of talent. Let's utilize the talent. We're looking for incubation support partners. We're looking for academic partners. We're looking for a cleanup crew. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah, so when we're talking about sustainable digital identity community, throughout the process, we are going to continue with our webinar short courses. We're going to continue reaching out to distinguished individuals like yourselves. We're going to continue mentoring those who have won and those who are in the pipeline. And we're also proud to announce that the following year we're going to launch, actually we're launching today, a digital ID ambassador program. It's going to be a university ambassador program so that we can put the power of this initiative in the hands of the students where we are not. They can advocate for us. And we can then support them through this ambassador program to proliferate our initiative as well. Finally, where are we going, right? This is the first year. It's going to become, rather, it is an annual hackathon, meaning in September we are looking for contributions. We really struggled, being honest, we really struggled to get access to these students because they're spread all over the continent. You did see the diversity in language, in region, and in ideology. So with your support, we can reach more. And I said we want 54 countries the next time we are up here on stage. And all the support that we have talked about. Next, we also, these ideas, we want to make them public in a use case library to benefit yourselves, right? To benefit governance, to benefit civil society, and so on. We're also launching a multilingual digital identity online course under the patron of CMU Africa. And finally, we said from Africa, for Africa, in Africa, but we want to add to the globe. Finally, we can put something out there. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. So just a final slide is, we didn't do this without partners. We had ID for Africa, the Gates Foundation, and I'd like to invite Kanwal for an award as I introduce the other partners. We had industry partners. These solutions have been developed, please. These solutions have been developed on MOSIP and Credible. And we've had regional partners, Al Hawaii University, University Sheikh Anta Diop in Dakar, and finally the Industry Innovation Lab. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. I wasn't planning to speak, but this presentation by all the students actually, all of them were brilliant presentations, motivated me and inspired me to come here and say why I got so motivated and inspired. You know, we have been attending a lot of talks. There have been a lot of abstract things being talked about. Should we do open source? Should we do open standards? But what we saw here was something very unique. In fact, this was the first set of presentations where somebody's actual problems were described. What is a problem that a farmer is facing? What is a problem that a pregnant woman is facing? And these were not just PowerPoint slides. These are actual built solutions. These students took open source code available, applied the pain points that they knew from their own geographies, completely came up with the ideas on their own and built the solution. And I think that is a great lesson for us as we look behind our badge, which Andrew actually said a couple of times, right? From Africa, for Africa, in Africa. How are we going to get this innovation? We all talk about the ID industry, which is building secure technologies. The question I would like to ask is, how are you going to support them? So I think one takeaway lesson that I would throw a challenge to the whole room, whether you're a development partner, whether you are ID industry, doesn't matter where you are based, whether you're a consulting company, the real question to ask is, how will we create the innovators of tomorrow, which is what I think this hackathon is doing a great job of. And Andrew mentioned, I was very, very happy to see 30% female participation in this. And I'm not a very numbers person, but that does tell me we have a lot of way to go, right? Right? With that, thank you so much. A brilliant job by all the students. I think we should have one more hand just for the students. Yes, please. We want everybody on the stage because, yes, please, everyone on the stage. Oh, yes, and one other thing. If you want to see these actual solutions, on Friday morning, 8:30 a.m., there'll be a workshop where all these teams are going to demonstrate their actual solutions, and we will judge them and pick a winner. So, and this is going to be the most fun workshop with actual solutions and actual problems. So I'll be there. I highly encourage everybody to be there.
Maybe we need to move
down.
Yes.
Okay.
On the stage. That's fine. You just come this side, Andrew. Yes.
Arnab, come.
That's smart.
Mitul and Shweta, please. Yes, yes.
You can come this. Good. ID for Africa.
ID for Africa.
So this is the only session where people were looking for pictures at the end.
Yeah.
Celebrities of Good. Thank you. See you on Friday.
We have to announce on Friday, yes.
Yeah.